This episode is brought to you by BigMooseCoffeeCompany.co. Pals, greetings and welcome to another episode of Everything Endurance. Thank you once again for joining us. As always, it's a pleasure to have you. Before we get into this week's podcast, I'm going to talk here for the benefit of anyone who is listening to this podcast as it comes out or around the time when it comes out. You, blessed people, are in with the chance of taking part in the Virtual for Rangers Ultra. For those of you that don't know, and I know I bigged this up on the last episode as well, Beyond the Ultimate run a yearly race out in Kenya in partnership with Save the Rhino and For Rangers, where all the profits go straight into looking after the welfare of the wildlife rangers who put their lives on the line day in, day out to protect the rhinos, the elephants, and the other beautiful creatures that live in that area. They're absolutely wonderful people, and they are out there during that race, lining the course, helping people out and keeping a watchful eye out to make sure that everyone's safe while this ridiculous running event is going on. I mean, it's an absolute jamboree. You've got to go on YouTube and have a look at the videos of it. It's the most epic race, and the great thing about it is the amount of fundraising that it generates that helps out those wildlife rangers. This year, they need help more than ever. And for obvious reasons, we can't take the race to them this time around. And that's kind of gutting. So what we are going to be doing, since we can't be out there in Kenya bagging those miles, is we're going to be doing it from our own front doors and seeing if we can't celebrate their work and raise a little funding to help them through this difficult time. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, I'm sure it does, then take a look in the description under this podcast and you will find a link for the Virtual for Rangers Ultra. Okay, so go and click on that, learn what you can, get involved. It's going to be great fun. I'm going to be out there running as well. And this isn't, if you're listening to this thinking, well, I'm not an ultra runner, I'm not going to be out there running huge numbers of kilometers. That's not what it's about. You can start off taking part in this running as little as 5 kilometers a day or hiking 5 kilometers a day throughout. That's absolutely fine. And you'd be joining me there. I'm going to be doing 5K a day throughout. I'm only just working my way back to running fitness myself, so join me there. It'll be great fun. Onwards then to today's guest. Today's guest has been like a backdrop to this bonkers summer of FKTs that we've had. No matter what else has been going on, who else has been setting whatever ridiculous record, always in the back of your mind, this runner has been out there in the middle of something. What he's done over the course of 31 days, 23 hours and 2 minutes is reach the summit, self-powered, of all 282 Scottish Munro mountains. The Munros. Scottish mountains over 3,000 feet each. Okay, so we're not talking about tiny little lumps here. We're talking about significant climbs, 282 of them. I say self-propelled, and I'm very careful in saying that because this isn't strictly a run that he's done. He's also been cycling from place to place during that. There's been other parts of this grand tour that he's put together where he's had to kayak between locations. So self-propelled all the way through, but this isn't strictly a running adventure. This was just about getting to every single one of those peaks. So not only has he done that, which works out as something utterly ludicrous, like just under 900 miles of running with just under 900 miles of cycling in between. We're talking about having covered the amount of ascent that would take you up Everest 14 times over the course of that month. He also managed to take more than a week off the existing record for running the Munros. That is bonkers. Just take a second for those numbers to wash over you for a moment and really appreciate what this runner has done. And he already had a fine ultra running caliber, but what he's done this year is absolutely sealed in the minds of the running public what a lot of people already knew, which is this guy is absolutely nails. We are, of course, going to be talking today to Donnie Campbell. Donnie, how are you doing?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me on. Getting there, recovering, so yeah, can't complain.
Yeah, well, as you've just said before I press record on here, we're not even a week on from finishing this now. So seriously, give me a little detail. How are you doing? Are you still blistered and battered, or are you starting to feel human again?
Getting back to normality, just getting hammered with media stuff, and then also with my own work. Because I've pretty much been skiving for 5 weeks with my own work. So yeah, it's just been chaos sitting at a desk. Actually, looking back, running was the easy bit. Like I really do miss just the simple lifestyle of running up and down hills and not having to worry about work or commitments or anything like that. So yeah, looking back, like yeah, I really enjoyed the simple life.
Well, I've heard that so many times. People, I think from outside the ultra running scene, people get the impression that every second out there on the trail is just grueling and horrible. But actually, you've only got one thing to worry about the whole time you're out there, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, there was a lot of suffering. But, looking back, suffering equals kind of type 2 fun. So you look back and it was fun now, where at the moment it wasn't really that fun. It was a lot of kind of pain and that. But, it's just kind of, it was nice to finish. It was great to meet my target and get to Ben Hope and do it in under 33 days, which was my schedule. But then again, I was also quite sad because it's like 12 months of my life was focused around this big adventure, and it's kind of over now, and it's just like readjusting to normal life. So you kind of get mixed emotions of being totally ecstatic that you've made it and it's like a dream come true, but then again it's like an end of a chapter of your life to a certain extent, and you kind of like processing it. It's like, that was really, really cool, glad to have done it, but I'm kind of missing just being out in the hills. I'm actually paying for some Munros, believe it or not. It was like, even this morning I was like, do you have time to take the bike out for a spin? I was just been so busy, I was like, I haven't had a chance. So hopefully tomorrow I can get at least out and get some fresh air and just kind of spin the legs and the bike. But running wise, it might be another week or so before I'm back. Just sauntering up hills with the wife, Rachel, or that. So yeah, it's kind of.
Yeah, it's odd to think, isn't it? I've spoken to people after some really grueling challenges that they've done, but usually it's a matter of a few days. What you went out there and did was 31 full days. That's a month out there on the trail. That's long enough for your mindset to have adjusted to that being your daily norm. So more than usual, that's got to be kind of difficult to then come back and find a month's worth of work emails stacked up waiting for you.
Yeah, it's it was kind of my routine. It was like 5 a.m. up, run by 6 a.m. I'd be running pretty much all day, depending on where the Munros were and how they lied. And that was just, then you just focus on recovery and sleep. So, it was very simple van living, outdoors, mountains. It's kind of like that dream scenario. In reality, at the time, there was a lot of hard work and a lot of suffering. And yeah, I was pushing myself to the limit. But, looking back, it's kind of like comparing it to, normal living of having work commitments, financial commitments, mortgages, bills to pay. It's a really nice way to live for a month, and it's kind of like sad it's over. But yeah, at the time I was like looking forward to a rest day. Now I'm looking forward to getting back into the mountains.
Yeah, I bet. You mentioned there as well that this was sort of the culmination of a year of planning. That's preempted a couple of my questions, where a lot of what I've been seeing this summer is people have come up with wild ideas during lockdown because they've seen their whole race calendar cancel. So a lot of ideas that they just dreamt up in sort of February or March this year that they've thrown together. This sounds like something you've had in your mind for a lot longer than that. Would that be right?
Oh yeah, it's been on my mind for over a year. It's like planning and commitment. I committed to it last summer. I've always wanted to climb all the Munros in Scotland, and I'm kind of fussy. I like doing the hills. I like doing, the ones that you normally keep your feet dry, a bit more technical. Mainly the West Coast. I'm going to be biased. I'm from Skye, so like Skye and Torridon and the West Coast of Scotland is probably the nicest area in the world. And it's got some of the nicest mountains. Whereas you compare that to like the Eastern Cairngorms, it's more rounded plateaus with a lot of bogs. So, the very remote ones, some of the remotest Munros in Scotland are just rounded, boggy hilltops. And zero motivation to go and do them, even though I want to climb them. So kind of like, well, it'd be cool just to do like them all in one big go. And then obviously being an athlete, you kind of research stuff and look at the scene like self-propelled style. So cycling and kayaking, but teaming's pretty cool. So it's like, I'm going to be using my own steam for, to do all these Munros and travel around Scotland. And it's like, sounds like a great adventure. And then kind of Yeah, it was just like summer last year. It's like, okay, I'm going to take a break from racing next year, i.e. this year, and really focus and do this challenge and kind of set things up last year. So I was originally planning to do it at the end of May and beginning of June for longer daylight hours, and before the school holidays broke up, so the roads would be slightly quieter, and the hills would be slightly quieter, but obviously that all changed with COVID restrictions. So yeah, it was kind of well planned, but also last minute planning, because I couldn't really finalise any plans until middle of July, until I knew the restrictions were going to be lifted for August. So it's kind of like twiddling thumbs for 3 or 4 months, just watching government announcements, waiting to see would I get a chance this year to do it, or would I have to do it in 2021?
God, yes, of course. That make perfect sense. There'll have been a period of time there where you'll have had no idea when you'd be able to go out, and these rules would relax a little bit, and you'd be able to go out and do it. Did you find there was any kind of dent in your motivation during that time, where the goalposts were just moving? Were you still training as hard throughout?
I was still training, like I enjoyed training, and kind of like, and you're looking at other countries, and you could see that some restrictions were lifted. There was never so. I was hopeful for an attempt in August, but I wasn't like set on it, and I couldn't put anything in place until I knew definitely it was going to happen. So it was kind of like in the back of my mind, it's like, yeah, August is a possibility, and I was kind of calculating how late could I leave it into the late summer, autumn, before you're going to get too much bad weather or loss of daylight and stuff. So I was calculating, the latest I could possibly start it might have been middle of August. So yeah, you're always kind of thinking. But then again, I'm kind of laid back, so I also think, well, it's the world we live in. So if I don't get to go this year, I don't get to go this year. I just do it next year. Like there's a lot of people that didn't get to do their A races or didn't get to do what they're doing. So I'm very lucky and privileged that my main goal for this year I've managed to achieve, where some athletes have not had any opportunity to do what they've been training for.
Yeah, absolutely, and what a positive way to be looking at that disruption that could have put you back a little bit. I'm keen though to go back even further than the last 12 months. We've not had you on the show before, Donnie, and it'd be good to talk to you a little bit about how you came to be where you are. So, what's your history with the sport of running? When did it first really grip you? Where did your adventure life begin?
Cool. So I grew up in the Isle of Skye, and I played shinty, which is kind of like a Scottish game played up like the West Coast and Speyside area. So I played that to quite a high standard, up to Scotland under 17 squads and under 18 squad.
Wow.
And then at 17, I joined the Marines. So you can obviously I've always liked adventure and outdoor lifestyle, because obviously you don't join the Marines if you're not keen on getting wet and miserable and cold. So, so I joined the Marines at 17. Did that for 3.5 years. I've always had a sporting background. I always wanted to be sporty. So once I left the Marines, I kind of went to university to study sports coaching and development. But it was more kind of team sports orientated at that point. So, I did a bit of outdoor coaching. So I was a kayak coach, and also a football coach, and I also coached shinty. So kind of coaching is my background, but a variety of sports. But it wasn't until after university. So at university, everyone does it. Goes out, parties too much, drinks too many beers, too many takeaways.
Yeah.
So I got into running to get fit to play shinty to a high standard again. So I used to be all right at it, but I just put too much weight on. So yeah, it was when I was getting fit again, but just by running. One of my friends said, "Come and do this race on Youre and Youre." It's no longer running, but it was a multi-stage race organised by sandbaggers, and it was like 150 miles over Youre and Youre in 5 days. And I was like, oh, that's cool. That's kind of like stuff, I joined the Marines for, just that bit of adventure. And I did that, when was that now? Oh, man, it must have been late 2000s, maybe 2008, 2009.
Okay.
And then since then, I've been into long distance running after that. So I've been into long distance running for over 10 years now. And once I left university, did a few other bits and pieces, but mainly then kind of went into personal training in a commercial gym. Didn't really enjoy that, because I wasn't really into, getting big, or, people would come into a commercial gym and say, I want to lose weight. And you go, okay, what do you enjoy in the gym? And you're like, I don't like the gym. You're like, well, why are you coming here? Why don't you take up cycling or running or badminton? Try something you like doing if you want to stick at it longer than coming to a gym that you hate doing.
Yeah.
just to lose weight. And it's just like, well, I'm not enjoying it. They're not enjoying it. So I set up my own coaching business. And thankfully, my mate had a running shop in Edinburgh at the time, so I opened up a studio in there, and I worked specifically with runners. And then that developed to more online coaching where I'm at the moment. So yeah, that's how I'm basically a running coach or endurance-based coach, and I run up and down hills a bit. So yeah,
you run up and down hills a bit. As understatements go, Donnie, that's pretty big. I guess coming from the Isle of Skye, you were surrounded by some inspiring countryside like this. That must have led to you going down this route. Is that what you get out of these ultra long distances? Is it that being out in the wild?
So yeah, coming from Skye does have an impact. Growing up in the countryside, being used to being wet and cold, which is normal in Skye, and but also my first Munros and kind of my introduction to kind of mountaineering was the Coolins in Skye, and it's the most technical hills in the UK. It's very alpine, it's very rocky, it's very kind of grade 3 scrambles and above. So that's my grounding in Munro bagging really was the Coolin. So I've always compared stuff to the Coolin. So for example, Tower Ridge, which is a kind of a famous ridge line on Ben Nevis, it's kind of like iconic long ridge line. I did that and I was like, that's nothing compared to some of the stuff in the Coolins. So that's how I compare technicality in the mountains. Even when I go to the Alps and climb like Mount Blanc, I'm going, how is this compared to the Coolins? Most of the time it's like, yeah, it's not as bad or as technical as the Coolins. So answer to your question originally, why do I do this kind of stuff?
Yeah.
I don't think there's one straight answer. There's a combination of factors. So
I don't think there ever is, but yeah.
I enjoy being outdoors. I'm curious at how far I can push my body. Obviously in the last couple of days of this challenge, then I knew I could empty the tank, and kind of things snowballed. It wasn't planned, but it's kind of like, well, let's see how far I can push it. I've ran previously for 48 hours non-stop fresh, but could I do that after 29, 30 days of running? And, it's that kind of, moving fast and light in the mountains, because you're not always running up and down there. But that being outdoors, just kind of being in nature and challenging yourself against nature, you're never going to conquer a mountain. It's only going to let you there. But, it's kind of that idea of, just moving fast and light and just seeing how good, well, not how good you are, but, just challenging yourself and see how far you can push yourself and see where your personal limits are.
Yeah, yours are pretty far out as well, Donnie. It's worth bearing in mind, I guess, quite a lot of the challenges that I've talked about recently here, because it's been a summer for FKTs and the like. These have been runs. These have been people running from one point to another. This was self-propelled, but there was a lot more involved in it. You come from a multi-sport background. You brought that to this challenge. For the sake of people that maybe don't know the ins and outs of how you went about this, what modes of transport were you using, and about how much of it was a run and how much of it was otherwise propelled?
Cool. So there was 3 modes of transport: running or power hiking or just moving on your feet, crawling, scrambling, whatever you want to call
whatever it takes. Yeah.
That was probably the majority of it. And then the next one was cycling. So obviously linking Munros up by road and also using the mountain bike. So for example, there's some Munros that have got like 10k of Land Rover track to either come in or out of. So, I had my wife as support crew, so she would do bike drops and stuff like that so I could follow a more linear route. So, if I started a mountain range or a ridgeline, I didn't have to get back to the start. I could just go from A to B, drop off, and there'd be my road bike or mountain bike to cycle and get the road bike and then cycle onto the next road. So it made planning more interesting because you weren't taking the normal walking routes, because you're dropping off and linking big days up and going, you're linking Munros up, you wouldn't normally link up because, I would start the day and like for Rachel to get to where I would be finishing, it could be a 2.5 hour, 3 hour drive with the way the roads lay out. So, to do that in kind of one day with a car drop is not feasible. So I was getting to do stuff that not many people do route-wise, dropping to very remote lands where maybe lucky if 1 or 2 people have been there. That's pretty cool to be kind of like really remote, but then again, it's also not great because there's normally a lot of bogs and a lot of heather and no paths. So
yeah, I got you.
But yeah, that's kind of how it was set up. And like I would sleep in my van each night. So Rachel would drive the sport van. That'd be my base for each night. So I'd just get in, recover, have some food, and then sleep. So yeah, that was kind of like the way it was set up.
So, sorry, did you say Rachel there? Was your wife saying? Yeah. Was she the entirety of your support crew through this then? Because that sounds like a separate podcast for her month of adventure. Like that, that's huge.
Yeah, she was my main support. So I had support runners and people join me for different bits, and we calculated the other day. It was like, I think they joined me for about 65 Munros. So I had company of 65 Munros of the 282.
Wow.
And a couple of people joined me for the cycles. But just with COVID and everything, it kind of made sense just to have one group of people inside your bubble in the van, living closely. So originally my wife managed to get 2 weeks unpaid leave. In hindsight, that was a great decision because she got to know how I was feeling, what I wanted, and how the van works and everything, and how everything worked and how we flowed as a team. Yeah, it was very much a team challenge. Whereas originally, when I planned it in May and June, for her work, she was only going to get 3 weeks annual leave, and then I was going to have my sister and brother-in-law and my parents do a week each. So, that would have been a bit more chaotic and a bit more kind of work for me, kind of like getting to know a new sport crew, getting to know what I want at the end of the day, what I want for breakfast, etc., etc. So, yeah, thankfully, it worked really well. And yeah, Rachel had a massive adventure as well, and she was working, if not as hard, but harder than me, dropping bikes off, driving the van, cooking, getting supplies. She pretty much did everything. So, for example, this is how lucky I was. I'd come in from the end of the day with a very sweat running vest, and then I'd drop it down, and then she would empty the water bottles, take all the rubbish out, unpack it. So in the morning, all I had to do again was repack it with the food and the stuff I needed for that next day. So that's how much work she was doing. So I could just literally get in, have a shower, recover, eat, and then sleep. I didn't have to lift a finger, which is a very nice way to live as well for a month. But
yeah, absolutely. Well, what a dedicated support team. And the logistical considerations involved in being in the right place at the right time while you did this for a month must have been huge. I mean, the planning to make sure that your routes lined up in a way that made sense. Did you have that solidly set out before this got started, or was there some winging it involved along the way?
So the routes were mainly... So it took me about 2 months to finalise a schedule and a route. So how it came to be 33 days was I looked at the record, which was Stephen Pike's, which was an incredible record of 39 days.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's quite out there. So that, I'm an all right runner, so I could probably maybe get close to it on a good day. So I looked at, like OS maps, and I kind of worked out, okay, what can I do in one day? And depending on the way the Munros are, depending on the way the Munros are laid out, dictates how big a day you're going to be. So I looked at some days and went, okay, well, I know on a fresh day I can do like 60 odd K in the mountains with 5,500 meters of ascent. Yes, it's a big day, but I know I can do that in training. But the question was, could I do that after 7 big days or 8 big days and stuff? So
yeah, each
day I know I could do when I set the schedule out, but I didn't know if I could do them consecutively. That was the big question mark over this challenge. Was I able to? And it's when I put all the days together and the route together, it worked out at 33 days. I didn't sit down and go, okay, I'm going to do it 33 days. How do I make it work? It's more, how big days can I go and how the route worked out? And it turned out to be 33 days. So yeah, the route was fairly set, but some of the lines slightly changed in the day, which wouldn't make any difference because I would finish and start at the same place. But the actual line I thought might have been the quickest line.
Yeah.
So when you get eyes on ground, it might not be. You might end up carrying along a ridge line before dropping off. And then the only thing that changed from the schedule is when I dropped the day on day 22, because I was just completely smashed after being in Youre, which is some really remote Munros. It was really wet and windy. I thought, well, there's no point battling the weather. I'm feeling rubbish. I'm probably going to have to drop it in a day or two anyway, so I might as well drop it now. And then at the end, where things kind of snowballed out of control for the last 2 days and ended up running for 48 hours. So they're the only things that kind of went a bit off script, but that's fine.
I got you. So after Youre, then you had a day out of your schedule.
Yeah. So basically, round about day 17 was kind of like lowest point. It was like really hard mentally because I'd been going for 17 odd days. I've been doing big days, like 12, 14-hour days, really smashing my body.
Yeah.
And like my left ankle started hurting. So I've been managing a sore right ankle and it's gone away because obviously I've overcompensated my left. That flared up on day 17. I just put me in a bad place on day 17. But then kind of got back on top, but just focused, day at a time. And, leading into day 20, which was 21, which was Youre, I was doing massive days. Got to Youre. The weather was rubbish in the morning, a few good hours, and then it crapped out again in the afternoon. Youre was really, really remote. So basically, once I left the van, I was miles away from the road for the whole day. So that kind of drained you mentally.
Yeah.
Especially with the weather being switched on. So, even if I messed up on Youre and got myself into trouble, mountain rescue would be a very, very long time. So you're very switched on and very focused, not to go over your ankle or something like that. Yeah, and that was like, what was that, 62k I think that day was, and about 5,500, 6,000 metres of ascent. So that took me about 14 and a half hours. So I finished that day completely broken. That was probably the worst day I was finished because I was just having to push and just kind of keep moving just to stay warm. And I was completely smashed by the end of it. And then the next day I got up and the weather still wasn't great. So I did like 3 Munros to kind of get myself into the next glen. And then I was meant to commit to like a row of 9 Munros, which is South Shield Ridge. And I was just cold and I just knew I wasn't moving efficiently. Like I was just really tired. I was like, I could commit to it, but by the end of the day I'm going to be even more broken. And I'll probably drop a day the following day or commit again and then drop a day the following day after that. So I had big days coming up consecutively. So I knew I couldn't manage like doing another 3 or 4 days of 12, 14-hour days. It wasn't feasible. I was like, well, I might as well finish early today when the weather's rubbish, get some rest, recharge, and then go again. And that's what happened. So I dropped the day knowing that, I had days in the bag over the record. So I wasn't overly fussed about that. I was like, yeah, okay. To eventually drop the day, it was a very ambitious schedule. And it wasn't until towards the end I was thinking, how could I make that day back up? And how do we plan to make that day back up? But that was doing a big day on the Tuesday. So not doing like what I ended up doing and finishing late Wednesday night, but that all changed.
Yeah.
Just smashing it all in the last 2 days.
Yeah, we'll come to that in a minute because your last 2 days of this were absolutely monstrous. I guess at that point, it seems ridiculous when you're still 48 hours away from the end of a challenge to refer to it as the home stretch, but you seemed to hit a point towards the end there where you knew I can empty the tank now. I can lay everything I've got left on the line. But we'll come back to that. Obviously there were some tough days during this. Anyone who goes out and covers long distances will know that in a 2-3 hour run, you have ups and downs. If you're going out for a full day, you'll have peaks and troughs. What was it like over the course of a whole month? Were there? Do you remember it all clearly, or are there big chunks of it where your mind just wanders, where you're not quite focused on where you are? How do you handle that much isolation and difficulty, I guess?
I'm used to being alone. I'm used to big days in the mountains by myself, so that doesn't faze me to a certain extent. I'm kind of happy with my own company. I might be slightly introverted, but that's the way I'm made.
Ideal in this sport.
Yeah, so basically what was kind of going through my mind in certain days, like, it kind of, you'd be switched from, focusing on the route, focusing on making sure you hit every Munro, you don't want to miss a top. That to obviously, kind of trying to focus on a day at a time, Munro at a time, but also thinking about, weather and nutrition, making sure you're eating and stuff like that. And, when kind of like, motivation was low or, you kind of think, okay, it might be getting hard. One of the motivating things I used was there was a few people that said this wasn't possible to do it in the schedule, and that kind of motivated me. So it's kind of knowing that, people said it's not possible, and I'm kind of like stubborn. I'm like, well, if it's not possible, I'm going to go and prove it is possible to a certain extent. Nice. So that kind of used motivation on that as well. And then also got a strong Christian faith. So, even though I'm in the mountains, I know I'm never really alone. I know Jesus is with me. And that might sound a bit strange for someone that hasn't got a faith. It's hard to explain, but that's the way I felt. I knew things were working out for a reason during the round. For example, everything kind of worked. Like, for example, being delayed and then Rachel being there supporting me for the whole 5 weeks. All these wee things and kind of wee things that happened that went wrong but ended up going wrong at the right time to get fixed. So, for example, we had a generator powering a recovery pump machine. So it's basically big compression bags on the legs to help flush the lactic acid out in the evenings.
Oh, wow.
That generator broke down when my brother-in-law came to visit, and he's very mechanically minded, so he fixed it the same night. So it's that kind of things. It's just everything kind of just happened at the right time and the right reason. So yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, it's quite often something I ask runners about when we're talking is where do you go in the darkest places? What do you draw on that motivates you when things are going really badly? Is that where your faith is something that you can lean on?
Yeah. So yeah, like that. Yeah. So I know if I was successful or not successful, it wasn't going to be the end of the world for me. It wasn't. I don't define myself as a runner. I need to do this to get applause or gratitude or anything like that. I was doing it purely for me. And, I have that acceptance that, sometimes things don't work out for certain reasons, and everything has a reason, I believe, anyway, on that. So, yeah, the darker times, knowing that, I wasn't alone, which might sound strange to someone, if I was very remote and wind was blowing a gale like in Noida, I knew I still wasn't alone. Then motivation-wise, I'm very highly motivated, and I've wanted to achieve this because it was a challenge I felt personal about. I always want to climb all the Munros. So, this isn't just something I dreamed up of even just 12 months ago. It's something I've always wanted to do, was climb all the Munros. And then again, also in the darkest points, if I said it before, kind of using motivation, outside motivation, as in people have suggested that this schedule is very ambitious and not achievable. It's like, well, I believe it is. I'm going to prove you wrong. And that's kind of added motivation as well. So these are kind of different tools you bring in. And then also, sports psychology is massive. So you bring in maybe some positive self-talk, goal setting. So, okay, I'm just going to focus on getting to this next row. Or, once I get tonight, I'll reward myself with a bit of food I really want, but wasn't really rewarding myself with food because it was an eating competition as well. But, these kind of things, like, for example, on a nice big long day, thankfully, I'm sponsored by Tico, so I had loads of new socks, and there's nothing better than putting a pair of new socks on. So every big, massive day, like, it's going to be like 14-hour day, I would reward myself with a new pair of socks in the morning. These kind of wee tricks and kind of things help.
Yeah, absolutely. So how many pairs of socks did you manage to get through in the end?
I think I started with maybe like 7 new pairs, and then they sent me another 10 new pairs halfway through. So yeah, I think half the round was done on new pairs of socks at the start. So yeah, very thankful for my sock sponsor. They're great socks. They're kind of merino wool and kind of recycled plastic or something. There's a bit of recycling involved, but yeah, it's merino wool. But yeah, sorry for the conversation.
No worries, pal. What about shoes? This is it now. I'm starting to think about the numbers. How many pairs of trainers do you burn through on an event like this?
So because I kind of run in lightweight, minimalist shoes, I'm sponsored by Salomon, and if it wasn't sponsored by Salomon, I'd still wear the shoes. I was wearing Salomon shoes before I was even sponsored by them. So I do their shoes. So I was running in their new, different types of shoes with different grains. But the main shoes I was running in was their new S-Lab Ascent soft grounds, or their S-Lab Cross Max, I think they are. So you kind of more rugged off-ground ones. Then a couple of other pairs were just different type of trainings. Like the cool ones was a specific shoe that they'd made, the XC Alpine Pro, which is made for their climbing scrambling. So answer to your question, I crashed 7 pairs of shoes. So 7 pairs of shoes went in the bin.
Wow.
And that's purely because they're lightweight and they've been wet all day, and bashing them off rocks and stuff. So main wear was actually ripping the uppers rather than wearing out the treads, because the shoe being wet and then you going over boulder fields and kicking rocks and scraping your feet off boulder fields and stuff.
Bound to happen.
Yeah.
And what about calories? How? I take it then Rachel in the van must have been providing most of your food for you as you went through. How many calories were you needing to burn through each day to get this done? And did you lose a lot of weight cumulatively over the attempt?
I lost a bit of weight. That was inevitable. You're never going to replace every calorie.
No.
So like during the day, like when I was away from the van, thankfully again, the running shop, Run For It in Scotland, gave me loads of Cliff Bars and shot blocks. So no offense to Cliff Bars now, I don't want to see another one for a long, long time.
Yeah.
When I was away from the van and running, I was eating Cliff Bars, shot blocks, Trek bars. They were my main source of fuel. I was trying to stay away from gel, so that was that. And then when I was at the van, it was just pretty much as much food as I can get in. So it wasn't really calorie counting when I was at the van. When I was running, I was a bit more, making sure I was trying to get minimum 80 grams of carbohydrate every hour when I was moving. But when I was at the van, it was more looking at it as an eating competition. How much food could I put in for dinner? I was really like, if I was at the van after an easy day or something like that, and I finished at 3 o'clock, which was one of the earliest finish, and I hadn't eaten for half an hour, it felt weird. It's just like I was constantly I wasn't even hungry, but you're just chucking food in. It's just horrible. It's a horrible feeling, just like every evening knowing that you had to eat till you kind of felt like really full and horrible, and then kind of crawl to bed.
Wow. And no, you didn't make that sound much fun. I mean, usually that's the light end of it, you're doing all this running, but at least you get to eat the great stuff. But no, that's just as grueling when you're trying to fuel 282 Munros.
Yeah, the novelty wore off quickly. Like I remember the day 6, I think it was, in the Cairngorms, I had a friend go down and collect some pizzas for us, and he had to phone and make sure you got the right order, because like, there was 2 of us, myself and Rachel, we had ordered 4 pizzas. There was 2 for me that evening, 1 for my lunch, and then Rachel was having 1. So my friend phoned up, was like, I don't know if I got the right order, I've got 4 pizzas.
Yeah, it's right.
I was like, yeah, that's right, bring them back up.
Grab another one while you're at it, why not?
Yeah.
So obviously, you're a coach yourself, but do you work with other coaches when you're preparing for something like this, or were you very self-contained in preparing for this?
I've got other friends who are coaches and medical experts, so I discuss stuff with them, and obviously I've discussed stuff with them previously. So I'm good friends with Robbie Britton. We had a chat about it. I'm also on a coaching WhatsApp group, which is a really useful resource as well. And then I'm also really good friends with Dr. Andrew Murray, who's a sports medicine doctor who's previously ran from John O'Groats to the Sahara and I've done adventures with before. So he's really good for, more scientific, medical kind of, that side of stuff as well. So from all that and from experiences, kind of, chatted to a few friends and stuff. And again, I spoke to other mountain runners that knew different areas slightly better, just to get their input into certain routes. And, sometimes they kind of like, well, why didn't you look at this? And it made sense. I just hadn't seen it in the map. So it was a big collaboration.
And what did your training look like before this event? I mean, I don't mean sort of tapering, but at the peak of your training, how much mileage were you getting through trying to prepare for this? Was it all mileage focused?
I was probably more volume focused. So I don't really look at mileage. Like I would normally work in ascent. But for this challenge, I was kind of working more than hours. So my biggest peak week was 30 hours of training, or around about 30 hours of training. But on average, I was probably averaging between 20 and 25 hours a week leading into the peak weeks. And that was a mixture of, probably 80 to 90% running and then 10% cycling. And it was just big days. It was all zone 1 and 2 training, so very low intensity. Like, I think I only put in maybe 1 speed session a week, and it wasn't really a great speed session because I was just doing so much volume. But I didn't really worry about it because I didn't have to worry about speed. That's kind of how my training looked. It was just specific, like as much as it could be. During lockdown, it was just reps on my local hill, which I just lived next to, literally across the road. I'm on trails, and I've got a hill that's like 280 meters high, so it's not exactly high. No. But you can get like 1,000 meters of climbing in the space of like 10, 15K, because it's a mountain bike area as well, so there's lots of mountain bike tracks. It's not like you're running up and down the same hills. There's different ways up and down, so it kind of keeps it varied, but yeah.
Yeah, well, thank goodness you had that just right outside your door during lockdown. That must have been a lot of help to you.
Yeah, it's kind of like the way you plan it. Like we moved from Edinburgh 2 years ago, and one of the conditions of buying a new house was it had to have trails literally at the doorstep. So You set your life up to what you enjoy doing, and one of the priorities when we were buying a house a couple of years ago was like, we need to live near trails. It's simple.
Yeah, fair enough. Totally understandable. So as a coach then, having done the challenge now, is there, now you know exactly what it takes to do 282 Munros, is there anything you'd go back and do differently in your training to prepare yourself for this?
Probably not, because I was successful and I felt...
Well, yeah, all right, that's a good point.
Fitness-wise, really good. Like, I never really struggled cardiovascular endurance-wise. I struggled a lot with tendinopathy in both ankles, anterior tibia tendon, which is due to all the bogs and uneven terrain, and that's hard to train for. You can't do 70 hours of training, which I think was my lowest volume week during the ride. So you just physically couldn't do 70 hours of training to train your body to do that. So I think that's the type of things you have to firefight during a challenge. You're never going to be able to replicate the volume, even if you're doing, like, say, for example, an FKT that's a couple 100 miles or 100 miles. You're never going to run that in training. So you're always trying to manage injuries or that, for example. So that's probably what made it harder than just the endurance-based stuff. If I could change one thing and to go faster, I'd probably have more support runners. If you have more support runners, you don't have to carry kit. You're going to move quicker. So especially in the bigger days, like Youre, my bag would have been weighing at least 7-8 kilograms at the start with the amount of food for 14 hours. There's no aid stations, nothing. You got to carry everything. Plus, the weather is miserable, so I was carrying a spare waterproof jacket, a spare dry top. I knew how remote it was. Yeah. On that, if someone had carried my kit that day, it would have been massively easier. But that's the only thing it really changed to go faster.
Yeah, fair enough. I'd take your point there. There's not much you'd want to change in your training because you did it. Yeah. You were successful. Well, one thing I did notice throughout is that you seem to be doing your own social media updates through the entire thing as well. That's right.
Yeah.
Which is quite a lot to take on. And it seems these days that it's difficult to take on a challenge this big without feeling a pressure to keep the commentary going throughout as well. Did that extra pressure prey on your mind as you were going around? I have to say as well, your social media stuff was very honest. You didn't try and put a sheen on any of your days. You said what was going on out there, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, like I'm one of these people that likes to be honest in social media. I'm not like trying hide hard days or my suffering, but again, I don't overshare either. So normally when I'm living my normal life, I don't post that much on social media unless I'm doing something pretty cool or got something people might be interested in. But one of the things for the Munro ride was like, get people motivated, try and inspire people. I was like, for people following, it's like, okay, I'll put a daily update every evening of what hills I've climbed and how many Munros I've done. So basically, for that, I had a cheat sheet. So I had basically cut and paste off my schedule, how many Munros I did, what the name of the Munros were, and a running total, and then hashtags. And that all left me to do was leave a comment on how I was feeling each day. Some of the comments were literally, remarkable Munros done, and enough said, because there wasn't anything to say. They're very uninspiring mountains. They went fine. Whereas day 17, I just I'm terrible. I'm not enjoying it. I was honest.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it worked. And then occasionally my wife would put a morning post out on social media, and that's pretty much what worked. To answer your question, I didn't add much stress. Literally, it might have been 5 minutes of work editing a couple of photos off my phone and while I was eating dinner and writing a little comment. It wasn't like writing an essay. And because you're just writing how you feel, it's fairly straightforward.
Yeah, fair enough. I just know there are some runners that really engage with the sort of influencer side of what it takes to be a runner in this sphere these days. And is that something that interests you at all, or was this something that you did more to draw attention to it because you were raising money for charity as well, weren't you? Yeah,
so I was raising money for British Red Cross. No, I'm not really big into the influencer kind of, really heavy on social media. So yeah, I'm probably not the best person to sponsor from that point of view.
Don't say that out loud.
I look at myself more as an athlete and performance-based. And, when I'm not doing a challenge like that, I'll maybe post once a week, if that. on social media. But yeah, so I forgot what your question was.
Well, you know what? I rambled into the charity bit there. Let's talk a little bit about that.
So I was raising money for British Red Cross. Reason being, like, I watched a news video thing on Sky News at the start, during COVID lockdown, about the child poverty and child starvation in Yemen. And it was very devastating. Like, you're literally seeing like a 5-year-old boy with like a head of a 5-year-old and a body of like a 1-2-year-old. And, it's horrible to watch. And then, part of the news feature was like charities out there. So the Red Cross, which is part of British Red Cross, they're struggling to meet the demands because all their budget, all the financial donations have been cut, like London Marathon, all the big major sporting fundraisers, or any fundraisers been cancelled this year. So, their donation level's gone massively down, and, starvation hasn't gone away. Originally I wasn't going to do it for charity, especially during the COVID pandemic where everyone's really struggling financially anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, it felt the right thing to do for the British Red Cross, and kind of felt like, it's giving back a wee bit. It's what I could do to help, people less off than me. I'm very privileged. I've got a good job. I'm fairly successful. So, it's kind of, trying to give back a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we'll make sure there's a link to that and stuff in the description of the podcast so people can jump in and have a look and donate if they want to as well. So one thing I want to circle back to a little bit. We've talked about some of the harder moments and sort of day 17 where you were having a really, really difficult time, but you were out there for 31 days and you were out there because, you love the mountains. What were some of the highlights? What are some of the key, really good bits that you look back and remember now?
So the Coolins, I'm going to be biased, enjoy the Coolins. It was good to be home. I got it on a perfect weather day, so
excellent.
Not overly hot, dry rock, blue skies. Did it with a couple of friends, good company. It just felt like a day out in the hills with some friends. Like, because you're scrambling on technical terrain, you're not really thinking about how tired you are. You're more focused on what you're doing. And then when you're with friends as well, you're chatting away. So I never really looked at my watch that day going, okay, I've got so many more Munros to go. What time am I going to finish? Can I get in? Can I get this done? Can I get that done in the evening? How much recovery am I going to get? I was more just like, out in the hills, cruising over the ridge, pretty cool, knocking off the Munros. So yeah, that was probably the best day. I had some great days around the central belt, like down near Bridge of Orkney, most southern Munro, Ben Lomond. Like, it was 3 or 4 days. It was just constant cloud inversions. From about 700-800 meters you're above the cloud, and you could just literally see every hill you had climbed, or every hill you got to climb, like the valley and the cloud, which was really nice and warm. It's like maybe running in the Alps for a couple of days. So they were highlights. And then it's loads. Like, even the bad days, some of them were really good. So like for Youre, Youre is beautiful, but it's so brutal as well at the same time. It's one of these ones that's like probably a love-hate relationship. Like, I would love to go back and maybe spend a bit more time when I'm fresh. But it's just brutal because it's so remote and a lot of rough terrain and a lot of big climbs, But again, it's a gorgeous area. So, look at that and that was a hard day, but I kind of enjoyed it as well. I kind of enjoyed pushing hard and seeing how far I could push myself. So, yeah.
Well, you got what you wanted that day.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
I think you've had a good adventure all around if you can look back at it and say even the bad days were good. So yeah. I think you've come out on top there. And I want to go back then. I've remembered now the monster last 2 days. So how many of the Munros did you knock off in that last 48 hours? And how much sleep did you have?
Cool. So literally on the Sunday, I did 6 Munros around Torridon. It was basically 3 ridge lines. So 2 Munros, drop down, 2 Munros, drop down, 2 Munros. And that was probably one of my easier days. And this sounds ridiculous because this easy day was like still over 3,000 meters of ascent.
Wow.
And I still was on the go from 6 a.m. in the morning till probably about 3 in the afternoon. So still a long time out on your feet, probably 9 hours. But that was an easy day. And that afternoon, I was like, plenty of food, had 10 hours in bed. My original plan going to bed on Sunday night was to make my day up by doing the Phanex, Munro area, Ben Rivers and Ben Jerrig on the Tuesday. So I'll just stick to my schedule, finish early, sleep, and get up at 4 a.m. and do a big day, and maybe go from 4 a.m. till midnight or 10 o'clock in the evening on Tuesday. And then that would just leave me with the far north, which would be another 6 Munros, but quite spread out, a bit of cycling on the last day, and probably finish Wednesday night. That was my original plan. And I started Monday with that plan. It wasn't until like Monday afternoon, I was in kind of like the remote Fisherfields area, I started thinking, I feel quite good, I've had 10 hours sleep, I feel well rested, I feel well fed, the weather's nice. And I knew the weather was to break on Wednesday morning, and I'm going, could I just keep going tonight and just see how far I can get and do the Phanex and take it from there? So the Phanex is like 9 Munros. Once you commit to them, you have to commit. You come back out, you're just making double your work. You have to come all the way off the ridge and all the way back to the road, which is a fair bit away, and then come back in again. So you're probably adding 3-4 hours on if you just did half of them, dropped out and come back up. So it wasn't until I was climbing up Anchelic, which is the last Munros I had planned for that day. I phoned my wife and said, Rachel, have dinner ready. I'm going to go and start the Phanex tonight. And this was probably about 3 in the afternoon, because I had my dinner about 5 and started the Phanex. I think it was just after 6, which was 9 Munros. So I did them, and I said to Rachel, like when I was leaving, I was like, okay, I might go and do Ben Withis tonight as well, because that was an outlier, which involved maybe coming off the Phanex, an hour cycle, up and down Munro, and then head to another area of Munros. And I said there, I might go and do Ben Withis. I'll see how I feel when I get off the Phanex. If I need to sleep, I'll sleep. If not, I'll go and do Withis. And this is kind of where my mind started processing things, going, I know when I'm fresh, I can go for 48 hours non-stop without any sleep. The question was, could I do it after what I just previously done for the 29 days?
Yeah.
I thought, well, I'm just going to suck it up and see. I'll just do a bit at a time, and if I need to sleep, I'll sleep. So basically I came off the Phanex, felt not too bad, so went and did Ben Withis, and came off Ben Withis about 5. And I was like, okay, I'm going to keep going, but I'm going to lie down for half an hour till daylight comes in, because the cycle I had to do to get to the next one was maybe about 45 to 50 minutes on the bike, but it was a really busy, fast road, so I kind of wanted to wait till the daylight came in, so I basically started cycling at 6 on Tuesday. So that had been 24 hours on the go. And then just basically did Ben Jelly group, which is kind of like a A to B, but 6 Munros quite spread out. Finished there about lunchtime. And I had a long cycle to get to Benmore Ascent. Done them and came off them about 7 o'clock Tuesday night. And I was pretty tired by that point. I was really starting to feel it. I was like, oh man, I could just lie down. But I had a friend come to cycle with me, and he was sitting in the car with another friend. I'm like, I can't really sleep. I've got friends waiting for me. I should just get on the bike and go. So had a bit of food, got on the bike and went. And so cycling, I was pretty tired on the bike. It was like,
yeah, I bet.
It was like trying to not fall asleep on the bike or just like lose concentration and cycle into the verge. So basically cycled 80k, starting at like maybe 7:30 on Tuesday night, all the way up to the second last Munro, which is Ben Kilbrick, way up north. And as I got into the lay-by to do that Munro, I had another 2 friends who I thought had come up to run with me that night, but they came up to think, we'll park up because Donnie's probably going to do it in the morning. So I kind of got off the bike and bent a break where I am really, really tired. I could do maybe half an hour lie down and repower nap before I go. But it's like, man, these people are waiting to go up the hill with me. It's like, I can't keep them waiting. It's like, okay, we'll just go and do it. So I basically went round the van and said, he's coming up the hill. I'm like, yeah, I was like, great, I've got some company to share my suffering. And they were a bit shocked that I was actually meeting tonight. So they were really like, what's going on? Are we going up tonight? And I was like, so we did that Munro, came off that about 2 o'clock in the morning. By that point, the adrenaline was starting to come in. I was like, okay, might as well just go and finish it. Get it done in under 32 days. So probably cycled another hour and a bit up to Ben Hope. And this is kind of the weird bit. Like, got to Ben Hope, and then I just sat in the van for an hour because I had let the cameraman climb the hill and my wife Rachel and her mother-in-law, so they set off at 3, and I said I'll set off at 4 and get a sunrise shot. So I basically sat for an hour, The cameraman for the BBC Adventure Show, which is going to come out at the end of this month or beginning of September. They're making a feature. So I was doing a bit of self-filming during the adventure as well, and the cameraman would join me for a bit. So yeah, kind of set off at 4 a.m. and just went up Ben Hope, and so that's pretty much how it finished. So we got a bit excited and didn't wait for sunrise, so I finished at like 5 a.m. instead of like 5:46. So yeah.
After that cameraman had walked up to get the sunrise shot as well. How inconsiderate,
he was up
Donnie.
already, so it's fine. He was there waiting at the cairn, but there wasn't going to be a sunrise. That's why I kind of decided to go a bit quicker. So like the cloud was down and it was kind of really windy. The weather had broken. So the last 2 Munros on the summits, there's like gusty, maybe 50, 60 mile an hour winds, which is, it's all right, but it's not pleasant. No. So yeah, there wasn't much point hanging about for daylight to come in when it's just going to be cloud and wind. So yeah, just got up and came back down.
Oh, fantastic. And that was a big set of decisions to make right at the end there, when you knew ultimately that you had the record in the bag mathematically, to decide, you know what, I'm going all in. I'm going to do this 48 hours straight. Yeah,
like as I say, I like to push myself, and I knew I didn't have to hold anything back, so I could really see how far I can go. And it's great, like, you know, seeing how far you can push yourself. And yeah, like Tuesday evening, I was absolutely shattered. Like I was on my feet, and like even in the finish line, folks, I looked terrible. Like I looked completely spaced out. I've been going for 48 hours, so. But yeah,
it's not surprising. Don't take it personally.
Yeah, no. That's kind of why you do this. Well, that's why I do this. Is I want to see how far I can go personally. It's not about, you know, necessarily breaking records or beating someone else's time. It's about, you know, how far can I go? How deep can I go into the pain cave? Or, you know, examples like that.
Do you have another challenge in mind for the future? Wondering again how far that pain cave goes.
Not at the moment, no. The next challenge is me and my wife are on a waiting list to get a Siberian Husky puppy, so that'll be a
very different kind of adventure, but that sounds like fun.
Yeah, it'll be a good adventure, and also it means that I'll have company for the next time I do something crazy if I train it upright.
Oh, fantastic. Well, fantastic. Look, thanks very much for chatting to us today, Donnie. I really appreciate it. I can't... It's impossible in sort of an hour episode to go into all the ups and downs, no pun intended at all, of what you've just taken on. And, you know, I've been through in the introduction the numbers involved in this. It just remains for me to say congratulations. That is an absolutely epic thing you've done.
Thank you.
No worries. And I look forward to talking to you again when you've done whatever other bonkers challenge you come up with in the future.
Maybe a few years, but thanks for having me on.
No worries. Thank you. You enjoy the rest of your day, Donnie.
You too. Cheers.